All right, we're going to continue the review looking at the material from chapter 11 on quadratic equations. So there were three basic ways we were solving quadratic equations. One way we did it was by factoring. Okay. Another way we did it was by using the square root method. Taking the square root of both sides. And then the third way we did it was by using the quadratic formula. Okay, so I want to do an example of each of those. So we'll look at number 15. So that was the solve by factoring. Remember, you need equal to 0. You need equal to 0 for this one, and you need equal to 0 for that one, for the quadratic formula or factoring. So your general strategy would be to get, most of the time, you're going to take a problem and you're going to get it equal to 0. And then you're going to try factoring. And if that doesn't work, you're going to use the quadratic formula, except on problems that have a certain form, except on problems where it looks like something squared equals a number. If you can get it to be something squared equals a number, then you typically use the square root method. Okay, so we're going to use factoring on this one because it told us to, but it's also the best way to do it. So you'd put an x and an x. You would use a 5 and a 6. We're just unfoiling. So put a negative in front of the 6 and then a plus 5. Okay. Then you're going to set each of those factors equal to 0. And you're going to solve it. And you're going to wind up with two answers. One of them is x equals -5 and the other is x equals +6. Okay. So that's the process for solving by factoring. All right. Then I wanted to look at number 16. That one is set up where you have something squared equals a number. Okay. So you're going to come in and you're going to first get the squared part isolated, which it is. And once it's isolated, you can come in and square root both sides to undo the squaring. Okay. When you do that, don't forget to take both the positive and the negative square root of the 16, I mean. Okay, so the square root and the squaring undo each other, and we get 2s plus 9 equals positive or -4. So either the 2s plus 9 equals 4, or the 2s plus 9 would equal -4. And then you just work that out. Those are both linear equations. So you just go in, and you get 2s equals -5, or 2s equals -13. So when we divide by 2 on each of these, we wind up with one answer being -13 halves and the other answer being -5 halves. Up here we got two answers, -5 and 6. Try to remember that with a quadratic equation, typically you get two answers, because this is the common mistake on this one, is leaving off the plus or minus and only getting one answer to the question. Okay. All right, now the next problem we're going to do is a quadratic formula one. So I thought we'd look at number 19. Of course, you got to work out all the rest of them and make sure you can get them to work. But I thought we'd look at this one. And it said to use a method of your choice. So what you really would have done is tried this with either a 4x and a 4x or a 2x and a 2x and see if you could get it to factor. But I can't get a 6x out of that one. And here I'd have a 1x and a 4x. I can't get a 6x out of that one either. So once I've tried doing the factoring, I'd say, okay, well, that's not going to work. And so then once I know that's not working, then I'm going to come back and I'm going to say A equals 4, B equals 6, C equals 1. Okay. So we plug it into the quadratic formula. You need to be sure you have that ready to use. Okay, so the B is 6. We're going to square that, minus 4 times A times C, all of that over 2 times the A. Okay, in here we're going to have the 36 minus the 16. All right, That's going to be negative 6 plus or minus underneath here a 20. Okay. All right. So at this point, we got to take the 20 and break it down. So we have 2 2s and a 5. And when you do the square root, those 2 2s, that's going to give you a 2 outside and a 5 underneath. So that'd be negative 6 plus or minus 2 square root of 5, all of that over 8. Now here, here, and here. All of those are even, so we can simplify this by dividing by 2 everywhere. So we'll have negative 3 plus or minus just 1 square root of 5, all of that over 4. Okay, and you wouldn't have to write the 1. So negative 3 plus or minus square root of 5 over 4. We don't need to separate it because these are not like terms. So separating it wouldn't get you anywhere. So just leave it, and this would be your final answer. Okay. All right, so those 3 problems are the ways you solve a quadratic. And then I thought we'd look at number 22. We did this in some of my class sessions. On that one, you're given a formula that represents the distance in feet from the ground. So that's basically the height of something. Okay, so that's the height of something. And then it tells you, the question is, when is it going to be 234 feet above the ground? So that is actually, that's a distance above the ground. So that's not a T, that's an H. When I copied this, I didn't put my T right there. Let me put that back in. Okay, so basically I want to know, when is this right here, which represents the height above the ground, or the distance from the ground, which is the height. When is that going to be 234 feet is what I'm being asked. Okay, so what we would do is we would subtract 234 to get a 0 on one side. Okay, when we do that, we get negative 16t squared plus 158t minus 234 is equal to 0. Okay. All right, now don't even try doing factoring when the numbers are that messy and that big. Plus it said we could round to the nearest 10th. So I'm just going to jump right into the quadratic formula. The numbers are larger than you're used to, but you've got a calculator. So use it. This would be negative 158, negative 32. Then underneath here, you would do the 158 squared. Now that turns out to be 24,964. And then there's 3 negatives, so it's going to be minus something. And then 4 times 16 times 234 turns out to be 14,976. Okay, so we're getting close. So now underneath the radical, when you subtract those two numbers, you get 9,988 under the radical. And you don't have to do this. You don't have to take that and try to break it up into 2 and whatever. Don't do that. You're supposed to get a decimal answer. So you're going to take that and just do the square root of it on your calculator. I would keep a little bit of extra decimal places. Ultimately, you're rounding to the nearest 10th, which is 1. But what I would do to start with is I would keep a few more decimal places, like at least to the nearest 100th, at least one more than you ultimately want. So you're not introducing round off error too soon. So now we got to do the plus 99.94. And then we got to do the minus 99.94. And you should have your calculator right now and be trying this, because a lot of times it's the calculator entry that gets you. If you type it in like this, it would be incorrect. If you type it in just like that on your calculator, you need to either have parentheses or you need to hit enter after you type in negative 158 plus 99.4. I usually just do it in 2 parts. I do negative 158 plus 99.94. I get negative 58.06 divided by negative 32. So after I hit the enter and get the negative 58.06, I divide by the negative 32, and then I round to the nearest 10th. So about 1.8. Okay, this one, 158 is negative minus 99.94. That gives me negative 257.94 divided by negative 32. And that gives me about 8.1 when I round to the nearest tenth. Okay. All right. So the answer to the question would be, it's going to be 234 feet above the ground at 1.8 seconds and 8.1 seconds. Okay. All right. And there was a typo on that. I think it was supposed to be a rocket. And then later it asked when would the ball be that many feet above the ground. It should be either rocket or ball on both of those, but that's not a mathematical issue. All right. Anyway, I'm going to stop sharing this and we'll continue with rational stuff next.